The storm raged across the mountains, its thunder echoing through the night as the wind howled and the rain poured down in sheets. High above the peaks, a shadow soared through the clouds, massive wings cutting through the sky with strength that could rival the storm itself. A dragon, her scales a beautiful shade of shimmering emerald, struggled against the wind. Her breath came in short, labored gasps as she flew, her body battered and bruised from the battle she had just escaped. Her name was Sylvia, and she had never known fear like this. Once she had been one of the most powerful of her kind, feared and respected by dragons and other creatures alike. But now she was a fugitive running for her life. The ancient dragons had turned against her. They had branded her a traitor for doing the unthinkable, raising a human child. It was forbidden, an ancient rule that had never been broken. Dragons and humans were not meant to be allies, let alone family. The laws were clear. Any dragon caught befriending or raising a human would be punished, and the punishment was always death. Sylvia had thought she could change things. She had hoped that by raising the child, she could prove that humans and dragons could coexist. But when the dragon elders found out, they reacted with wrath. The child, an innocent human boy, had been taken from her, and Sylvia had barely escaped with her life. But she could not leave everything behind. She had one last chance. Through the storm, Sylvia's wings beat on, her strength fading. Her mind kept drifting back to that brief moment of peace when she had met him, the human who had shown her kindness. Jace Quinn. He was a quiet man living alone far in the woods, away from the wars and chaos that tore the world apart. Jace had a special way about him, a gentle spirit that didn't fear the unknown. He had been kind to her, offering food and shelter when she had been hurt, even though he didn't fully understand who or what she was. Sylvia had never forgotten that kindness, and now she hoped it would save her. With the last of her strength, Sylvia angled her body down toward the forest below. She had to reach him. He was her only hope. If she could get to him, maybe, just maybe, he could protect her cub. Maybe Jace would be able to raise the dragon child and protect it from the wrath of her kind. As she neared the ground, Sylvia's wings faltered. She was exhausted. The once proud dragon, who had ruled the skies with ease, now could barely keep herself aloft. She could feel the life slipping away from her. The elder dragons would be coming for her soon, but she couldn't afford to waste any more time. Her claws scraped the earth as she landed, sending dirt and gravel flying in all directions. The moment her feet touched the ground, she collapsed. She had made it, but just barely. Her vision blurred as the world spun around her, and then through the haze of exhaustion she saw him. Jace. He came running out of his cabin, his face full of concern as he looked at the fallen dragon. He had no idea what he was walking into. All he saw was a massive creature, bleeding and clearly injured. Jace had lived a simple life, but he had always been curious about the world beyond his small home. He had heard stories of dragons, but never imagined he would see one with his own eyes. Are you okay?" Jace asked, his voice filled with hesitation. He stood a few feet away, not knowing whether to approach or run. Sylvia, struggling to stay conscious, only nodded weakly and let out a soft, sorrowful growl. She couldn't speak in human words, but her eyes, her ancient, wise eyes, communicated everything Jace needed to know. He understood instinctively that this dragon was in need of help. She wasn't a danger to him. Jace moved closer, his hands trembling slightly as he reached out to touch the dragon's wounded body. The scales were smooth but warm to the touch. He could feel the magic that radiated from her. I can't help you in the way you need," Jace said quietly, not sure what he was doing, but knowing he couldn't leave her like this. But then something changed. Sylvia's eyes locked onto his, and in that moment she seemed to make a decision. With her last bit of strength, she shifted her position, carefully reaching out with one of her massive claws. Jace watched in disbelief as she gently pulled something from beneath her body, a small, trembling dragon cub. The cub was barely bigger than a cat, its tiny wings folded against its body. It looked up at Jace with wide, fearful eyes. Sylvia nuzzled the cub into his hands, then gazed at Jace one last time. A soft, painful growl escaped her lips as she whispered something in the old dragon language, a language only dragons could understand. Jace didn't know what she had said, but he felt something in his chest tighten, as though he had just been handed an impossible responsibility. The dragon's head slumped to the ground, her eyes closing for the final time. Jace stood frozen, holding the cub in his arms. The weight of what had just happened settled heavily on him. A dragon, a dying dragon, had just given him her child, a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. And now he had to protect it. The cub's small claws gripped Jace's shirt, its tiny body shivering. The storm raged around them. But inside Jace's heart, something else stirred, a deep sense of duty. He didn't understand why this was happening, why a dragon had chosen him, but he knew one thing for sure. His life had just changed forever. He wasn't just holding a cub. He was holding the future, and he would protect it, no matter what. As Jace stood there, the rain falling softly around him, the cub nestled against his chest. He couldn't help but wonder what had driven Sylvia to make this choice. But those questions could wait. For now, the only thing that mattered was the little creature in his arms. The storm howled louder. The mountains whispered. Jace had no idea what he was about to face, but he knew this. This cub, this dragon child, was not just a symbol of a broken world. It was the beginning of something new, something that could change everything, and Jace was ready to fight for it. The days that followed Sylvia's death were a blur for Jace. He had barely slept, spending every moment caring for the dragon cub in his cabin. The cub, whom he had named Pyrrhus, was still small, barely a few months old, but it already had the features of its kind. Its scales, soft and shimmering, glowed faintly in the dim light of the cabin. Its wings, though small and weak, fluttered now and then, and its eyes, bright gold and full of curiosity, never left Jace. Jace had no idea how to care for a dragon. He had only lived a simple life, hunting, fishing, and reading the books he had collected over the years. But now his days were spent learning how to feed Pyrrhus, how to calm the cub when it cried, and how to protect it from the dangers that had followed Sylvia's death. One thing was clear. Pyrrhus was no ordinary dragon. There was something about the cub that felt different. Sylvia's bond with it had been powerful, yes, but Pyrrhus seemed to have inherited something more, something ancient and strong. But no matter how much Jace tried to understand, there was one thing he couldn't escape: the law. The dragons had their own rules, and Jace had just broken them. The sound of wings filled the air, and Jace's heart skipped a beat. He turned quickly, his breath caught in his throat. Outside the cabin, the air shimmered with heat. The storm from the night Sylvia died had passed, but the tension remained. There, flying through the sky, were 3 dragons, massive creatures, their wings slicing through the air with an authority that made Jace's stomach drop. He recognized them immediately. These were no ordinary dragons. They were the Elder Council, the rulers of dragonkind, and they were coming for him. Jace had heard stories of the Elder Council, but he never thought he would meet them. They were the most powerful of their kind, ancient beings who held the traditions and laws of dragons for centuries. They were known for their strict adherence to the old ways, their belief that dragons were meant to rule the skies. Untouched by human hands, Jace stepped outside, feeling the weight of his situation pressing down on him. Pyrrhus was still inside resting, but Jace knew the cub wouldn't be safe if the council found out about it. He took a deep breath and stood tall. There was no way out now. The 3 dragons landed in front of him with a thunderous crash, their massive bodies causing the ground to shake. The leader of the group, a large dragon with dark blue scales and piercing silver eyes, stepped forward. His name was Aldrak, and he was known as one of the most powerful of the elders. "You are the one who has broken the law," Aldrak said, his voice deep and filled with authority. "You have taken in a dragon cub. You have violated the ancient pact between humans and dragons." Jace's pulse raced. "I didn't mean to break any laws," he said, his voice steady despite the fear creeping up his spine. "I didn't know what else to do. She gave me the cub before she died. It wasn't my choice." Aldrak narrowed his eyes, studying Jace for a long moment. "You speak of Sylvia. She was a traitor, a disgrace to our kind, and you are now her accomplice." Jace shook his head, stepping back slightly. "I'm not an accomplice. I just want to keep it safe." The second dragon, a female with golden scales and sharp green eyes, spoke next. Her name was Valora, and her voice was softer, though no less fierce. "You don't understand. By raising this cub, you have broken the balance. Dragons and humans are not meant to coexist. It is against the natural order." "I'm not raising it to break anything," Jace replied, his voice growing more urgent. "I'm just trying to help. This cub, Pyrrhus, doesn't deserve to suffer because of your laws." "It's just a child," Valora hissed in disbelief. "A child? This is a dragon, not a human. You don't know what you are dealing with. The third dragon, an older male with gray scales that seemed almost ancient, stepped forward. He had not yet spoken, but now his voice came out as a low rumble. His name was Thirok, and his presence alone commanded attention. Enough, he said, his voice like thunder. Aldrak Valora, we have heard enough. The human has broken the laws, but there is no need to punish him. Yet, he turned to Jace. We have one final request. Hand over the cub. Return it to us, and we will leave you in peace. Jace felt his heart hammer in his chest. They wanted him to give up Pyros. He couldn't. He couldn't let them take the cub away from him. No, Jace said firmly, stepping back to the cabin. I won't do it. I swore to protect this cub, and I will keep that promise. I don't care what your laws say. Thirok's eyes narrowed, and a dangerous silence filled the air. You misunderstand, Humyn, he said, his voice cold. You cannot protect what you do not understand. The cub is ours by birthright. You have no claim over it. Jace's mind raced. What was he supposed to do? He had no power to fight these dragons. But he couldn't just let them take Pyros. The cub was his responsibility now. I'm not asking for permission, Jace said, his voice low but unwavering. I'm asking for you to leave. If you want the cub, you'll have to go through me. The three dragons paused as if considering his words. Then Aldrak's lips curled into a sly smile. You are brave, Humyn. But bravery alone will not be enough. The cub is a symbol, a key to something much bigger. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. Jace's mind whirled, but he refused to back down. He wasn't going to give up Pyros, not now. Not ever. The tension in the air thickened, and the dragons looked between each other. They seemed to sense Jace's resolve. With a final, heavy sigh, Thirok spoke again. This isn't over, Humyn. You've made a mistake, but we will give you time to reconsider. If you do not hand over the cub by the next full moon, we will return. And when we do, we will not be as patient. With that, the elder dragons spread their wings and took to the sky, leaving Jace standing alone, heart racing, on the ground beneath them. Jace watched them disappear into the sky, and then, slowly, he turned back toward the cabin, where Pyros awaited him. He didn't know what was coming, but one thing was certain. Things had just gotten much more dangerous, and he wasn't about to let anyone, dragon or human, take Pyros from him. The days following the Elder Council's visit were filled with tension. Jace could feel the weight of their threat lingering in the air like a storm waiting to break. The warning was clear. If he didn't surrender Pyros by the next full moon, the elders would return. And when they did, they wouldn't be so patient. Jace couldn't stop thinking about the dragon's words, especially Thirok's cryptic message about the cub being a key to something much bigger. What did that mean? Why was Pyros so important to them? And what was he supposed to do with the knowledge that the fate of not just the cub, but possibly both dragons and humans, rested in his hands? For days, Jace stayed holed up in his cabin, thinking, planning, and looking after Pyros. The cub had grown quickly, its scales now gleaming with an even brighter hue, and its wings, though still small, seemed to stretch a little further each day. It was more than just a dragon. It was something special, something that could change everything. But Jace knew he couldn't do this alone. He needed help. He needed someone who understood dragons better than he did, someone who could help him make sense of the mess he was in. That's when he thought of her. Elia Ravenshade, a name whispered in some of the more obscure books Jace had read, was known to be one of the few humans who had a deep understanding of dragons. Elia had spent years researching dragonkind, both their biology and their ancient cultures. According to the texts, she had once lived in the far northern reaches, studying dragons in their natural habitat, but rumors said she had vanished from public life years ago. Still, Jace knew that if anyone could help him, it was her. Without wasting another moment, he gathered a few supplies and set off into the mountains, hoping that she was still around and that she would be willing to help him. The journey to Elia's home was long, but Jace was determined. The mountains grew steeper as he climbed, the air thinner and colder. He pushed on, each step bringing him closer to answers he desperately needed. After a grueling 3-day trek, Jace finally reached the isolated cabin that Elia had once called home. It sat at the edge of a vast forest surrounded by towering trees and jagged rocks. The windows were dark, but as Jace knocked on the door, he heard movement inside. The door creaked open, revealing a woman in her mid-30s, her face framed by dark, tangled hair. Her sharp, intelligent eyes assessed Jace quickly. He didn't need to introduce himself. Elia Ravenshade had a reputation that preceded her. "I'm not in the habit of receiving visitors," she said, her voice calm but wary. "What brings you here?" Jace hesitated for a moment before answering, his voice steady despite the urgency in his heart. "I need your help. There's a dragon cub, one that was abandoned by its mother, and the Elder Council of Dragons wants it back. They're threatening my life, and I don't know what to do." Elia raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but cautious. "A dragon cub? And you're trying to protect it?" "Why?" Jace nodded. "It's not just a cub. It's important. I can feel it. And the dragons? They said it was the key to something bigger. I don't understand what that means, but I think it's something dangerous. I need your knowledge to figure this out before the elders come back for it." Elia studied him for a long moment before stepping aside, motioning for him to come in. "You've come to the right person," she said, "but we have much to discuss." Inside her cabin, the walls were lined with shelves filled with old books and scrolls, many of them detailing ancient dragon lore. The room smelled of herbs and incense, and a fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. As Jace explained everything that had happened, the attack by the Elder Council, Sylvia's death and his promise to protect Pyrrhus, Elia listened intently, nodding every now and then but saying little. When he finished, she stood up and began to pace the room. "You're in more danger than you realize, Jace," Elia said, her tone serious. "The Elder Council is not just concerned with the cub. They've been watching humanity for centuries, and they won't tolerate any disruption to their rule. If Pyrrhus is truly as special as you think, they'll stop at nothing to get him back." Jace looked at her, frustration creeping into his voice. "Then what am I supposed to do?" "They said I have until the next full moon, but I can't fight them on my own. I'm not a warrior. I'm just a man who promised to protect something I barely understand." Elia stopped pacing and turned to face him. "You're not alone in this. The cub has something in it that the dragons don't fully understand yet, and that's why I believe it's our best chance at changing the world for both humans and dragons." She walked over to a desk, pulled out a large map, and spread it across the table. "There's an old prophecy," she said, her finger tracing the lines on the map. "It speaks of a time when dragons and humans will unite under a single banner. When that happens, the two species will share the power of the skies and the earth. The key to this union is the one who holds the blood of both worlds." Jace frowned, confusion clouding his thoughts. "A human? And a dragon?" Elia nodded. "Yes, it's possible that Pyrrhus is the one the prophecy speaks of. His blood could be the bridge that unites the two races. But the Elder Council will never accept that. They'll fight to keep their dominance even if it means destroying everything in their path." Jace's heart raced as he tried to process everything Elia had just said. He had always known that Pyrrhus was special, but he never imagined it could be this important. "So what do we do now?" Jace asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elia stood tall, a determined look in her eyes. "We do what hasn't been done in centuries. We form an alliance, humans and dragons working together. And to do that, we need to show the dragons that they can trust humans, through action, not just words." Jace nodded, a sense of purpose filling him. "Then we have to find allies. I won't let Pyrrhus face this alone." Elia smiled, the first sign of hope Jace had seen since this whole ordeal began. "We'll need to move quickly, but together, we can change everything." As the night stretched on, Jace and Elia began planning their next steps. The road ahead would be dangerous, filled with uncertainty, but Jace was no longer afraid. He had a purpose, and with Elia's help, he would make sure that Pyrrhus, this little dragon who had come into his life by chance, would fulfill his destiny, whatever that might be. And as the first rays of dawn peeked through the trees outside, Jace knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would reshape the future of both humans and dragons. The days passed quickly as Jace, Elia, and Pyrrhus prepared for the challenges ahead. With the full moon approaching, they knew the Elder Council would return. But Jace had no intention of handing over the cub, and Elia had a plan, though it was dangerous. It was their only chance to change the outcome of this conflict. The small cabin in the mountains, once a quiet retreat for Jace, had transformed into a base of operations. Maps and ancient scrolls were spread across the table, and both Jace and Elia were poring over them, searching for anything that could help them in the fight to come. "Once the full moon rises," Elia said, her voice steady. "The Elder Council will come looking for Pyrrhus, but they won't just come with threats. They'll come with their power, and they won't hesitate to destroy anyone who stands in their way." Jace clenched his fists. He knew what the Elder Dragons were capable of. They could breathe fire that could melt stone, and their wings could carry them faster than any bird or human. But what made them most dangerous was their ability to command the elements themselves. The Council had always maintained an iron grip on dragonkind, and it was clear they would fight to keep that power. "Then we need allies," Jace said. "We can't fight them alone." Elia nodded. "I've been in contact with other dragon groups. There are a few who disagree with the Elder Council's ways. Some are young and some are older dragons who've grown tired of the Council's rule. We'll need them if we have any hope of winning." Jace was quiet for a moment, thinking about Pyrrhus. The cub had grown rapidly, its wings now large enough to carry it short distances. But it was still a child, and the full weight of the world was on its small shoulders. Jace had promised to protect it, and he was determined to keep that promise. "We need to be ready," Jace said, finally breaking the silence. "When they come, we can't just defend. We need to make them understand that the world can't keep going the way it has. We need to show them the truth." Elia gave him a sharp look. "What truth?" Jace turned to look at Pyrrhus, who was resting in a corner of the cabin, its eyes closed but alert. "The truth that dragons and humans can live together. We don't have to be enemies. The prophecy, Pyrrhus, everything is connected. We can change things if we show them that we're not just trying to steal their power. We're trying to create something better, for both of us." Elia considered this for a moment, and then surprisingly she smiled. "You've been thinking about this for a while, haven't you?" Jace shrugged. "I didn't have much else to do but think while preparing for an ancient council of dragons to kill me." Elia chuckled. "Fair enough." The day of the full moon arrived sooner than expected, and with it came the gathering storm. The weather seemed to match the tension in the air, dark clouds swirling above as lightning flashed across the sky. Jace stood at the edge of the mountain pass, gazing out at the horizon. He knew the dragons were coming, but he couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. The time for hiding was over. From the shadowed trees, Elia and Jace's small group of allies emerged, dragons who had rejected the Council's rule. They were not as numerous as the Elder Dragons, but they were powerful in their own right. The first to approach was Xanthi, a red dragon with gleaming scales and fierce eyes. She had always felt that the Elder Council's strict laws were too rigid, and her strength came from her ability to adapt and change. She had been watching over Jace and Pyrrhus from afar, and when the time came, she had made her move to join them. "I don't know what this battle will bring," Xanthi said, her voice steady, "but I know that it's worth fighting for. The Elder Council has ruled us with fear for too long." Behind her, a small group of dragons, young and older, each one filled with quiet defiance, stood ready. Some were injured from previous battles, but all had the same resolve in their eyes. They would no longer allow the Elder Council to control their fates. Jace nodded, his heart racing. "We don't need to fight them with power. We need to show them that we're not their enemies. We need to fight with something stronger." "What's stronger than a dragon's fire?" Xanthi asked with a raised brow. "Hope," Jace replied. "The idea that we can change. That we don't have to live in fear anymore." Elia stepped forward, her face set with determination. "Jace is right. We'll face them not just with strength, but with the truth. We will unite the dragons who want change and show the Elder Council that their time is past." As the sun dipped behind the mountains, and the full moon rose high in the sky, the sound of dragon wings filled the air. The Elder Council had arrived. Aldrak, Valora, and Tharok landed before them, their massive forms casting long shadows across the ground. The ground shook with their arrival, and their eyes gleamed with the same cold authority that Jace had seen before. But there was something different this time. They had been expecting fear. What they got instead was resistance. "You again," Aldrak growled, his voice thick with anger. "You've gathered traitors and weaklings. You think you can defy us?" Jace stepped forward, standing tall despite the dragon's intimidating presence. "I'm not defying you, Aldrak. I'm showing you that we have a choice. Humans and dragons don't have to be enemies. We can live together," Valora sneered. "Your words mean nothing. You cannot change the way of the world with speeches. The Elder Council's rule is final." "Not anymore," Jace said. "It's time for a new path. A path where dragons and humans work together, not fight each other." Tharok, the oldest of the Elder Dragons, studied Jace for a long moment. Then he spoke in a voice that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. "You speak of unity. But unity cannot be built on lies. The prophecy says that the cub will bring balance. But if you believe that a human can hold the power of a dragon, you are a fool. Jace shook his head. I don't believe Pyrrhus holds the power of a dragon alone. But I believe that together, we can create something new. A future where both humans and dragons can live without fear. For a long moment there was silence. The wind rustled through the trees and the full moon shone brightly overhead. Then slowly the Elder Council's gaze softened, just a little. Perhaps they realized that the world had changed. Perhaps they realized that their rule, built on fear and ancient laws, was not the way forward. Finally, Aldrak spoke. You have one chance, human. One chance to prove that you are right. If Pyrrhus is truly the key to the future, then let it be shown. If not, Jace interrupted, his voice unwavering, then we fight. But not for power, for freedom. The tension between the two groups hung thick in the air. The battle for the future was about to begin. The night was thick with tension as the Elder Council faced off against Jace, Elia, and the dragons who had pledged their allegiance to the idea of a new future, one where humans and dragons could coexist. The full moon hung high in the sky, casting its pale light over the battlefield. The air was heavy, charged with the magic of dragons and the courage of those who refused to bow to the ancient ways. Aldrak, Valora, and Therok stood before them, their eyes full of centuries of pride and power. But now, there was doubt. A flicker of uncertainty in their gaze as they looked upon the gathered dragons and the human who had dared to defy their rule. Jace stood tall, his heart pounding in his chest, but his voice steady. We don't need to prove that we're stronger than you. We need to prove that we're stronger together. The Elder Council remained silent, but their expressions were hard. Aldrak took a step forward, his wings unfurled, the air crackling with his power. You ask for a union between dragons and humans, but you forget, human, that the laws of our kind have stood for millennia. You think they can be undone with mere words? Jace shook his head, stepping closer. No, Aldrak, I don't think words will change anything, but action will. It's time to stop living in the past and start building the future. Valora hissed, her eyes glowing with fury. You speak of change, but change comes with a price. Do you think your pitiful rebellion can truly defeat the Elder Council? We hold the knowledge of centuries. You cannot just erase that. Jace met her gaze. I'm not trying to erase anything. I'm trying to build something new. A future where our children don't have to fear each other. A future where dragons and humans can work together. The wind howled around them, and for a moment there was silence, an unnatural quiet that made the heart race. Then, the ground trembled beneath them as Pyrrhus stepped forward. The cub now grown into a young dragon with wings that stretched wide. Its golden eyes shone with a wisdom that seemed beyond its years, and its presence seemed to calm the air itself. Pyrrhus lowered its head, looking directly at Aldrak, Valora, and Therok. The elder dragon stared at the young dragon in awe, as if sensing something deep within it. A power, an ancient strength that they could not quite understand. Jace watched the Elder Council closely, his mind racing. This was it. This was the moment that would decide everything. Pyrrhus is not just a symbol, Jace said, his voice unwavering. He is the bridge between our worlds. He carries within him the potential to unite us. But that potential can only be realized if we choose to work together, if we choose to stop fighting. Aldrak studied Pyrrhus for a long time, his expression unreadable. Then slowly, he spoke. You ask for unity, human, but can you truly understand what it means? Do you know the cost of change? Jace nodded, his heart heavy with the weight of his words. I do, but I believe the cost of not changing is far greater. If we don't change, we will continue to fight, to destroy each other until there is nothing left but ashes. Therok, who had remained silent for most of the confrontation, finally spoke. His voice was deep, as if carrying the weight of ages. You speak with conviction, human. But the history of dragons cannot be ignored. We have lived by the old ways for so long. Jace met his gaze. History is not meant to bind us. It is meant to guide us. But if we continue to live in the past, we will never move forward. You may have ruled for centuries, but the world is changing. And if you want to survive, you will need to change with it. The words hung in the air for a long moment, and it seemed as though the world itself held its breath. The Elder Council remained still, their eyes flicking between Jace and Pyrrhus. The cub's golden eyes shimmered with a quiet understanding, as if it knew what needed to be done. Finally, Aldrak spoke, his voice low and filled with a reluctant respect. You have shown courage, Humyn. More courage than most dragons I know. Perhaps there is something to your words. Valora stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. You expect us to just accept this? To let go of centuries of tradition? I don't expect you to accept it, Jace said calmly. I'm asking you to consider it, for the future, for the dragons and the humans who come after us. We don't have to be enemies. We can be allies. There was a long, tense silence. Then, Tharok gave a slight nod, his eyes thoughtful. The future you speak of is unknown, but we will not let our pride blind us forever. If Pyrrhus truly is the key, then perhaps we are not the ones who should decide. Aldrak looked at Valora and Tharok, his expression dark but contemplative. Finally, he turned back to Jace. You have your chance, Humyn, but this is not the end. If Pyrrhus is truly the key, we will watch. We will see if this alliance can survive. Jace's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and excitement. This was it, the beginning of something new. But he knew that the path ahead would be difficult. The Elder Council had given them a chance, but the road to true unity would not be easy. There would be challenges, and there would be those who would resist. But as he looked at Pyrrhus, now standing tall, its wings spread wide, its eyes filled with a powerful ancient wisdom, Jace knew that they had already taken the first step. We will make it work, Jace said softly. Together. The dragons who had sided with Jace cheered, their voices rising into the night sky. They had witnessed something they never thought possible, the first step toward a new world where dragons and humans could coexist. They knew the road ahead would be hard, but they also knew that with Pyrrhus at the center of this new alliance, there was hope. And as the moon hung high above, casting its pale light over the gathered dragons and humans, Jace felt a sense of peace settle over him. The battle for the future was not won by fire or fury, but by hope and unity. A new world had begun.